The Magic Show is brought to you by StarCityGames.com, and check this out. On December 3rd, the StarCityGames.com Open Series comes to St. Louis, and this event is going to be huge. We're talking hundreds of players, over $14,000 in cash prizes, at least 18 players qualified for the Charlotte Invitational at the end of the year, live coverage all day long courtesy of SCG Live, and as much Magic the Gathering as we can pack into one weekend. So make plans to join StarCityGames.com in St. Louis, and we'll see you there.
Well, I mean, I think one of the big shifts we've had in the last couple of years is Magic's been wanting to tell stories. You know, we've gone through many incarnations of trying to tell stories. There's Antiquities with using flavor text to sort of hint at something, and the Weatherlight Saga where we like weave stuff through the art. And so finally, I think what we've realized is the best kind of stories we tell, that the Magic tells, is what I call environmental stories, in which the story, because Magic is really good at showing environments. That's what Magic's strength is. And that here's a world, and here's lots of creatures in the world, and lots of things from the world. And individual plots don't tend to work that well. It's hard to tell a plot. I mean, Tempest was us trying, but it was we had to give you a rule book. Not a rule book, a storybook. So okay, now follow along and put all these together, and then look, there's a story, we promise. So modern day, what we're trying to do is do environmental storytelling, which says, can I show you the environment, and the environment kind of tells you a story. And I think Scars, Zendikar definitely was playing in that area, but I think Scars is us more hitting our stride in that kind of thing, where it's okay, here's the story. We go back to Mirrodin. Something fishy's going on, the Phyrexians are there, okay, comes to a head, there's a war, and then what happens? Phyrexia wins, And I feel like the Scars block did a good job of actually telling the story to the point in which everybody knows the story. Like you say to the average Magic player, okay, what happened? They'll go, Phyrexia invaded and they won. They had a war, they won. People know that. Now, if you, one of the running jokes that work is, Mike Turian admitted that he didn't know that there was an invasion in Invasion. That it's sometimes, most people don't even realize that the invasion, what it was is this attack by the Phyrexians in which, Gerard and company fight them off. Because, it's there, but you have to kind of look for it. And people miss it. But I feel like Phyrexia is did you get there was a war between Phyrexia and Mirrodin? Yeah, you did. It was kind of hard to miss. Did you get the Phyrexians won? Kind of hard to miss. So, and I think Innistrad's following up on that right now. Innistrad is definitely, we're setting the mood, and the story's, you'll see as we evolve, but, we're definitely saying, okay, here are the humans, they're surrounded on all sides by monsters, things aren't looking really good for the humans, and we're sort of setting the stage.
Yeah. The next set's called Dark Ascension.
Dark Ascension, things get worse for the humans, by the way, in Dark Ascension. It's, basically the way I explained it is, Act 1, the humans in a world where things are really bad. Act 2, it gets worse.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. So, I love the idea of there's a war, each side gets its own weapon to fight the war, each side is trying to get things to fight the other. I love the idea of, if you had conflict, well, what would they do? Well, each one would try to build their own strengths and get their own weapons, and they also would figure out what the enemy was doing so they could try to fight the enemy. And I liked how that played out. The perfectionist in me, I feel like Besiege wasn't perfect in that I like the two sides. There's little tiny things I would fix, I guess. But I did like the general essence of it. I like the fact that the two sides were very well spelled out. As I said in my State of the Union, or State of the Design address, I feel like my big sort of design takeaway was I wish we had more balanced. I feel like the Phyrexian just got the better stuff, essentially, and I wish it was a little more balanced. I wish the Mirrors had kind of had something that's exciting. I feel like the Phyrexian's got the most exciting stuff, but I don't know. It's funny because clearly I was more impassioned on the Phyrexian side, so in retrospect, I'm like, I was very excited by the Poison, very excited by Proliferate, so to my defense, I tried to get it to do Affinity for the Mirror side, but I lost that one.
Even if it's done correctly.
I designed it, by the way. I had it all spelled out. I had Affinity Evolution, but and I understand why the decision was made. I think we felt R&D as a whole felt it was just too risky in that, what's the reward versus the risk? Well, having another broken environment with Affinity was going to go over pretty bad. And last time was horrible. So I think everyone's like, well, let's not go down that path. Even if it's awesome, like the risk is just so high, so we didn't. But
I mean, it feels like for the same reason that Innistrad's not set in the homelands world, even though it kind of would fit.
Well, I mean, okay, that's interesting. People have asked this. Two things. One is, I feel like we just went to Mirrodin, right? We just went to Mirrodin, and like, I don't think the next set is, okay, and now we're going to such and such. Plus, we wanted to do Gothic horror, like, I didn't want any constraints. I'm like, I want to do Gothic horror. And I think if you go to Homelands, you're tied into, Gothra, you're tied into certain things that are there. And like, do you want like Australian minotaurs? I mean, that's not really my take on the horror world, Oh, you made time a minotaur. That's me doing an Australian accent. Anyway, so I mean, there's a lot of pieces there, like the little dwarves, the sea dwarves. I mean, we wanted to have a clean slate. And the other thing, look, things have associations with them. We're more than happy to sort of revisit things people have positive associations with. But Homelands, I mean, I often talk about Homelands being, possibly the worst design ever in the history of the game. And it is not one of our high points. So it's not something we wanted to revisit. And then, look, I know there are fans that love Algothra, and I'm not really trying to diss Algothra, but it just didn't make sense to go back there. We want to kind of start fresh. Oh yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing, is we plan things, and then I have to kind of plot them out. But there's a difference between plotting them out and making them happen. So I knew what I wanted was, I mean, I understood that the Phyrexians were going to win. I mean, I knew that from the beginning. In fact, as I talked about in my article, originally, Scars of Mirrodin, that set was supposed to be, and look, it's New Phyrexia. They've won already. And we ended up realizing, we skipped over something kind of cool. Let's back up and watch them win. So, but it was a known thing. I mean, Phyrexia was going to take over, Mirrodin. That was a known quantity. So what I was interested in is watching them take over. So I was very fascinated by the, like, taking poison and watching it infect, and watching it, starting in black and green, and then got a little bit of blue, and then you saw white have it, and then red got, like, you watched the mechanics themselves kind of seeping through all the color pie, because I thought it was a neat way to sort of show the evolution of the Phyrexians and watching how they kind of take everything over. But the challenge for New Phyrexia was, like, well, once we got there, well, you needed something, like, it couldn't just be, and we're done. It had to be, well, what do the Phyrexians do with this new world, And so we had a lot of arguments back and forth. One of the things that I loved is, one of the keys of the Phyrexians is they changed flesh to metal and metal to flesh, which I always thought was fascinating. I don't know why they do that. I'm not, like, I see metal, let's make it flesh. I see flesh, let's make it metal. It just seems like they're just very uppity, like, whatever it is, yeah, that's what they want. And so I wanted to use artifacts in a way that were different. So, for example, when we did Future Sight, Brady and his team did a lot of concepting for the cards, and they were guessing kind of where we were going with them. So there was a 2/2 artifact creature that was blue, which it was a mirror. Okay, I'm horrible with names. No, it was a mirror. It was a blue creature that was an artifact creature, but it was blue.
This is from Future Sight, right?
From Future Sight, yeah. And it was a mirror.
Yes.
Anyway, that card, Brady, when he concepted it, said, "Oh, this is us visiting," because we knew we were going to do Phyrexia, New Phyrexia. So that was Brady hinting at New Phyrexia. Meanwhile, between Future Sight and Scars of Mirrodin, we had Shards of Alara, and we had to solve the Esper problem. And I came up with using colored artifacts as a way to do that. And Brady and I actually got in a big fight over it, because Brady's like, no, we're saving that for New Phyrexia. And what I said is, we will have to solve that when we get there. Usually the way it works in R&D is, look, the immediacy is more important than the future, because right now we got to figure this out, and the future, well, we have some time to figure it out. And Esper really wanted to have colored artifacts, but it meant when we got to Mirrodin, well, we'd use that, and I didn't want to just use it again. It didn't feel right. So in the back of my head, I wanted to evolve us to a place where we'd have colored artifacts by the end of the block. Because I thought, oh, well, that's flesh to metal, metal to flesh, that would seem cool. But I didn't just want them to be the Esper style. So what I originally pitched was, if you remember from Shadowmoor, monocolored hybrid. where it was, either red mana or 2 or white mana or 2. It's that whole cycle in Shadowmoor. And I wanted to do that. And so the idea being, we see them, it's flesh and metal being merged together. And R&D was like, and what else you got? I'm like, no, this will be awesome. And I just couldn't get they just weren't that excited by it. I tried really hard. And so when Aaron came up with the idea of Phyrexian Mana, originally it was colorless. Like it was, pay 1 or pay 2 life, I think it was, colorless. And I said to him, it needs to be colored because I wanted these to be artifacts. I wanted them to be colored artifacts. Because I'm like, the Phyrexians have infused them. And then how do we do that? Well, the neat thing about making it a colored mana was it now had this colorless quality to it, which is, you didn't have to have red if you're willing to pay some life. And so they made a lot of sense as artifacts because they kind of had that quality of you didn't need the color. Now, and there's a lot of interesting questions on the Phyrexian Mana. We had a lot of fights. I mean, the cards are like, I'm a big color wheel purist. In fact, in R&D, I'm the guy who's like, literally the nagger about color wheel. Like, the color wheel doesn't do that. Why are we doing that? And they're like, come on, it's cool. And, And I mean, I'm all for pushing and bleeding where it makes sense. But I'm a big stickler in that I try to keep certain things from doing them because once you do them once, then it does it. And like, for example, I had a big fight about the counterspell, for example. Originally, it was a force spike, by the way, so it was actually worse. And we had a lightning bolt for a while, or a shock. It was a shock for a while. Yeah. And anyway, so I mean, like, it's funny looking back, and that I like Phyrexian Mana. I do believe there's a time and a place to mess with the color wheel. I like a little bit of bleeding. I mean, the whole goal of New Phyrexia was, would artifacts do it? Because these are artifacts, essentially. Would an artifact do this? Well, if an artifact can do it, okay, that seems like, that's fair game. And so, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, looking back, I think you had some real, home runs with Rolling Pod. Oh, yeah. Phyrexian Metamorph. I like Phyrexian Mana. I mean, I don't think it was a mistake. I think individual cards, hindsight's 20/20. I mean, I think looking back, there's some cards I would have done if hell. There's cards I did try to do differently, but there's definitely things that I think we learned. You know what I'm saying? What's the -5/5? I remember no card names. What's it called? Dismember. Originally, by the way, was BB -4/-4. Phyrexian Black, -4/-4. And I thought it was cool because you can spend 4 life to do -4/-4, and or you can do B and 2 life. So it's funny, by the way. So I've been spell slinging, and whenever I'm talking to players, I tend to fall in R&D speak. Like instead of saying black, I'll say B, and I do that, and there's this little kid like, what are you talking about? And his dad's like, I think he means black.
Totally R&D speak.
So I try to be better about not on this show, I'll do my R&D speak because your audience is a little more savvy. Yeah. The thing that I don't like is the color pie is more about what things can't do. And then that's where I get more careful because, once you say this color that's not supposed to do that can easily do that, well, then that's where you're fundamentally breaking the color. You know what I'm saying? And I think that green is supposed to have problems with creatures, and I don't mind, for example, the whole fight is a good example. It's not that I don't want green to handle creatures, is I want them to do it in a way that's green. So the idea of, my creatures will fight your creatures, okay, that seems like green's answers to creatures is creatures. And I don't mind green having answers to creatures, but it needs to make sense for green. Green is not the I go kill things color. It's just not. It flies in the ethos of green. And so that's what people don't realize is I want to make sure colors can do things, but in general, that's another important thing. In game design, it's a general game design 101. What makes games fun is that you can't do what you want. When you design something, let's say I'm designing a lamp. The goal of most designs is to make it as easy as possible. The switch for the lamp should be where you expect the switch to be, and when you push it, it should do what you want. And the whole idea of design is making things as obvious as you can make them, that they do exactly what you expect. Except, in games and puzzle design, it's the opposite. We are trying to get in your way. We're not trying to make it as easy as possible. In fact, what would they do? Well, don't let them do that. And that part of what makes games and puzzles fun is that you are trying to solve it even though, the designer is literally getting in your way and trying to make it hard to do because that is what makes games fun. You know, if I just let you do whatever you want, hey, every color can do everything, that really wouldn't be fun. Yeah, I know people desperately want, the counterspell in red or the disenchant in red. Everybody wants stuff in red, apparently. Yes, it sounds nice because it's frustrating because you can't do that. But the neat thing to me is when you go, well, how do I solve this problem? And then you come up with neat ways to solve it. I think Magic is great at making people feel smart because it says, well, problem solve. Solve this problem. You get to build your deck. You get to put it where you want in. Well, here's the problem for you. And then I think that what people miss is it is that problem solving that makes it fun. If we made your life easier, you would hate us for it because the game wouldn't be as fun. And that as game designers, our job is kind of to get in your face and cause you problems. That's what we do. We're problem makers. Or we try to we try to force you to sort of have to figure things out. I tend not to be very involved in the core sets only because I have a lot on my plate, and I kind of do big vision stuff. Also, my job as a head designer is big picture. What are we doing? What's the essence of what we're doing? How is the blocks break down? What's the core of what we're trying to do? I think the role of design is to create a bullseye so that everybody is heading in the same direction, trying to do the same thing. So I think the biggest impact I have on the core set is I define the next year. So, for example, it's not a mistake that M12 has cards that play really well in your zombie deck or whatever. That's very much a purpose. Like M12 says, okay, well, here's what's coming. Okay, well, we want to put some stuff in to help with that, to set that up, and that we're very conscious, when we make core sets, we're very conscious about looking back and looking forward and figuring out what makes the most sense to do so that we're sort of enhancing the experience, and yeah.
Oh, sorry. So that sort of gives us, the Grimlock Lancers and Zombie Infestation.
Yes.
Even the new Jace that mills yourself.
Oh, yeah. It's not an accident. It's not like, gee, look at all these cards in M12 that happen to play perfectly in the new, It's not, it's very carefully plotted out and planned. And, one of the things I say to people is, I don't think people understand the amount of detail we go into because we will literally argue for an hour off what you might think the most mundane, tiny thing because it matters. The little tiny details matter. That's one of the things I constantly explain is that, even if people can't consciously see the detail, they subconsciously feel it, and things feel right. The whole reason for aesthetics and for doing all the tiny details is there's a feel of something when it's done right. Even if you can't quite understand why, you can perceive things on a subconscious level and just, when things are wrong, even little tiny things, it feels wrong. And that, I think Magic being what it is we have the resources to get the little details right. They do. They might not consciously notice, but they notice. That's the important thing is, and I love, by the way, when people do notice the details. One of my favorite things is when I do the unsets, I cram so many jokes in. Literally, there are jokes in the foil overlay printing, Goblin Mine, his foil treatment, there's a foil box. He's actually trapped in the foil box, or for example, I got legal to let me write the legal text on the box of Unhinged. If you read the legal text in the box, I wrote the legal text. I'm making jokes in the legal text, right? So, and I feel like you don't need everybody to notice that, but just the person who does, it says something about your dedication to the product. Because, the story I give is, my wife and I love throwing parties. We're mega party people. One of our hobbies, essentially, is we like throwing parties. So we were throwing, I think it was a baby shower for Aaron and Ann. They had the first baby. And they had picked baseball or picnics or something as the theme. We'd let them pick a theme. Themes are important in parties. So we had fake grass. So when you came in, everything was covered by fake grass, and we'd set it like a picnic or something. And Randy Bueller was there, and he made a comment. He goes about our parties. He goes, "Here's what I like." He goes, "It's not really the fake grass. It's the fact that they bothered to put the fake ants in it." And I'm like, look, I know most people aren't going to notice that I put plastic ants, in the grass, but somebody will, and that person will go, "That's awesome," and that's the kind of the details I love. Is I love when we manage to put something in that the guy who notices it just really likes it because it shows that we care and they care. I love those moments. Okay, Innistrad, a long time ago. So what happened was, it's like 10 years, flashback 10 years ago. So we had made Odyssey. I'd done Odyssey. And the creative team, a completely different creative team. So Brady Dunham was at Wizards at the time, but I think he was in editing. He wasn't on the creative team. And he and I were talking about Odyssey, and he was disappointed. He said, you made this awesome graveyard-themed set, all about the graveyard, and the story was about pitch fighters. Like, what does it have to do with the graveyard? And Brady had said, it's awesome. Like, it should have been like a gothic horror set. And so we started talking. And Brady was very enamored with the idea of gothic horror, and I was very enamored with the idea of taking the horror genre and sort of using that to design around, to say, let's maximize the horror genre. And so I had this idea, and I mentioned it multiple times, and I put it in different plans for things, and I think it got pushed out of my 6-year plan, because I think Scars and Mirrors was the last of the 6-year plan. So I put it like my next plan. I'm like, okay, I'll put it right there. Like, it's the thing. It's the 7th year, the 6-year plan. And I think there's a lot of dubiousness, because sometimes I pitch ideas, and the response I get is, "Oh, okay, Mark, And so what happened was, most people might say, how has Twilight made my life better? I will now explain. Because it's very hard to explain. So here's what happens is, Twilight comes along and kind of just really gave this breath of life to the horror genre. All of a sudden people that didn't even like horror kind of got invested in it. And then it started to snowball, and just other things started to happen, and that, not just vampires, but you saw zombies and werewolves, and just it breathed life into the whole kind of, the whole horror genre that it had gone to a little bit stale, and it got people reinvested in it. And people started realizing that they could do horror, but it didn't have to be straight up horror. You could, take some romance, as Twilight did, or take other elements and put it in. And so anyway, the ball gets rolling, and all of a sudden, this is a real business. Like, people are getting excited about horror. So when I go back and I say, hey, notice how popular horror is becoming? We should do a horror set. That I think that was the thing that finally sort of pushed, people are like, oh, well, I see what you're saying. It does seem to be popular, And so, in some ways, I think Twilight was very responsible for me getting to Innistrad. It's funny because there's almost no actual Twilight in Innistrad, and there's no sparkly vampires or anything. But I think that the momentum that it created helped me sell internally, look, I want to do a horror set, and people going, oh, okay. Because it's much when I say, look, guys, there's people making a lot of money selling horror, give me a shot, let me do horror, that I finally got them to say, okay, go ahead, do horror. So, okay, I sit down, Brady and I had a lot of discussions, and for years, we knew we were doing gothic horror, and I'm like, okay, I said to my team, here is our goal. We are going to do horror. This is our guiding principle. Whatever horror is, that's what our design is going to be. We're not going to dictate anything. We're not putting any mechanics. We're just going to say, what is this? What does it need to be? And I knew up front that werewolves were the linchpin of everything. Because magic has done everything else. Magic has done vampires, it's done zombies, it's done humans, it's done ghosts. All that magic is done in spades. But we've never really done werewolves. We've done 3 werewolves. None of them which were particularly good. I graded them in my article. I think C was the best we'd had, And some of them were literally like, what, really? I'm looking at you, Mr. Werewolf. So anyway, I said, okay, we got to nail werewolves. If we can nail werewolves, I felt like everything would come together. And so the more we looked at it, I'm a story person, obviously. I'm a writer, my background. And so I really wanted to get to the what is horror? And when you study horror, what you find is horror is all about facing your fears. It's about taking human fears and kind of bringing them to life. So werewolves, for example, are all about this sort of fear of your anger taking control of you losing control of yourself. Vampires are all about lust and not being able to contain the lust. Zombies have this whole sense of feeling like you're being mindless and that you're not really thinking anymore, and kind of like your whole life's on automatic, that you're just becoming this mindless drone. And all these horror tropes just play into the basic human fears. And so I'm like, okay, well, we want to capture that. How do we capture that? And what I realized is it all came down to transformation. That was the key element is things seem normal and seem, safe, but these things change into something that is dangerous. And the werewolves were the perfect poster child, right? here's a human, okay, nice guy. Full moon comes out, he's a werewolf, And we had to figure out how to capture the dark transformation. And so we tried a whole bunch of things. The other big runner-up was what I call day-night. So you would play a thing and says, if there's not a day-night card in play, put it in play. And you put it in play, and one side had a sun, and one side had a moon, and you would have a little track that you moved along. And the sun-night card told you how to use it. The trick of it was it told you everything. Just the other card said, well, put this in play. And then the card told you how to use it. And then you would track night and day, and werewolves become werewolves at night. And in fact, the way it used to work is everything changed at night. That was the creepy crawly stuff. Like the humans were better during the day, but it's like, oh, nighttime, all the stuff would come out. But it became hard to track. It was just complicated. It was one of those, there's cool stuff going on, but it just was too complicated. Meanwhile, Tom Lapilli had worked on Duel Masters. Wizards made a trading card game to go in Japan. We were trying to be the next big thing after Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh! Because both of them came from Japan. So we were like, well, we'll make it in Japan, and we'll make the next big thing, and then we'll move it to the States. And the first part worked really well. It was a huge hit in Japan, and so we still make it. They had done double-sided cards, double-faced cards, and it worked really well. And so Tom said, well, here's a neat idea. We did Duel Masters, because Tom had been on a Duel Master team. And I was a little skeptical in the sense that, okay, look, it's a pretty big deal going to double-faced cards. But in design, I'm like, okay, let's try it. I'm not going to rule anything out. And the more we played with them, the more it was clear that having two states is something was really cool, And so we were trying to figure out the best way to do it. And the thing that double-faced cards did that I don't think people give enough credence to is that it takes the states and separates them. One of the problems, whenever we make a card that's multi-stated, but the proper terminology, is we have to show you one state. And usually it's the more interesting state. So like, if we're going to show you a werewolf, you never see the human. Well, it's the werewolf, because that's more interesting. But you kind of miss the duality of it, And if you look back at like levelers or different things in which clearly there's like a change, threshold is the same thing where like it's state A and state B. And you always kind of miss, because we can only show you one thing, so you don't really get it. And the thing that double-faced cards did is, here's the human. You can see the human. He's a human. You flip over. Here's a werewolf. He's a werewolf. And you really got this deep down sort of, in design, I talk a lot about how when I came to the R&D, the design was math-centered. And that my big shift was moving into psychology-centered. That I was very like, it's numbers are great, but I care about? How do people feel? Like, I want to make something that people respond to, that there's an emotional investment in, And like Innistrad to me it wasn't just, I wanted people to feel what horror makes them feel. And for werewolves, what I knew is, I want to scare you. Because you'll see a human, and this human shouldn't be that scary, except he can become a werewolf. And you should be afraid of werewolves. They are dangerous and scary. And the thing I'm really happy with the werewolf mechanic, which, by the way, it's not named because we had transform, we already had a word on it. We decided not to name it. But it is a mechanic. I know when we don't name mechanics, people don't think they're mechanics. But the werewolf mechanic, which is my favorite mechanic in the set, here's what I love about it is it did what I wanted a werewolf to do, which is you play a human, but your opponent's like, I know that's a werewolf. I'm really afraid of the werewolf. Okay, what do I have to do to not have the werewolf come? And that it has this nice interaction where both players get to play this game of one player goes, I want the werewolf, and goes, I don't want the werewolf. And there's a nice interaction, because Magic's at its best with this interaction. And I wanted Innistrad to create this emotional sense of, I should be afraid of the monsters. The monsters should scare me. And I feel like the werewolves did a real good job of being threatening, but the cool thing about it is they're threatening before they're even there. That's the neat thing for me, is like, they're coming. It's kind of like, it's coming, that you're afraid not even of the monster itself, but the idea that the monster's coming is scary. And a lot of Innistrad, a lot of the stuff that we did was trying to capture the essence of horror, but also capture the feeling of horror. Like, for example, this is subtle, but I think good, is I put a little more randomness than normal. You randomly get cards out of your graveyard, and there's Cellar Door and Creepy Doll, and things in which you don't quite know what's going to happen. And what I found is that just was more suspenseful. Like, if I have a creature with Death Touch, well, every time I attack, that creature's going to kill my guy. There's no suspense to it. And I mean, and then I just say, well, if I attack, one of my guys will die. You just make that calculation. But Creep It says, well, maybe I'll kill you, maybe I won't. So when you're attacking, what's going to happen? You know, like when you know what's going to happen, it's not that scary. When you're not sure, it actually becomes a lot scarier. And so we did a lot of it. Like Salvador's the same way, where look, there's a chance there's not a zombie behind the door, but do I want to take that chance? You know, and the math says yes, take the chance, but the gut sort of says, ooh, you know, I'm kind of afraid of it. And I mean, that is where I think Innistrad succeeds. Is it matches what you expect, and it creates a feeling that, like, to me, is ideal, and that it really does copy what we wanted from the horror genre. Is it gets you kind of antsy and worried, and you know the monster seems scary, you know, and I think that's really important. You know, I think that people spend too much time about how they react mentally, you know, the intellectual side, and not enough emotionally. Because when push comes to when push comes to shove, fun is not intellectual, fun's emotional. You know, and that I'm a big believer that if you want someone to have a good time, you kind of got to go them on that emotional thrill ride, because that in your heart, something is fun because you feel it. That's why it's fun, you know. And that people always talk about how they'll read the cards, you know, and they'll have a intellectual reaction to them. And I always sort of say is that's good. I'm happy people. You know, I'm glad people read the cards and talk and stuff. That's great. But look, play the cards. I want you to feel the cards. You know, until you have played with them and feel what they feel like playing them, that's what we're going for. That's the honest to God's thing. That's why when people are sort of up in arms before they even play with stuff, I'm like, look, you got to play with the stuff, you know.
Well, and I think Double Face was a perfect example of that. Like, and it's been a while since I read something, and I was like, even in Magic, for me, I was just like, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not sure. Like, intellectually, you're just like, but you're turning the card over, and that's never been done before, and that's different, and how is that supposed to make Magic fun when we're taking out of sleeves and stuff or whatever, and that just never matters. And
well, I mean, and here's the thing that's important, is if something is fun, you will do whatever it takes. Meaning, logistics are important, but fun will override logistics. If I'm having a good time with something, I'm willing to do more, because I'm like, well, this is fun. And I mean, a lot of people are like, well, why couldn't you do them as flip cards? And one of the things I just try to get to them is, once you actually hold one in your hand and you start doing this, I mean, literally just the visceral, like, it's this and it becomes that, you know, like just that sort of visceral sense is real and it's palpable, and it's very easy to dismiss stuff. I mean, I know people like puffaw that, like, oh, whatever, you know, it's just a game, and I don't care if there's pictures on it. I'm like, baloney. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people who are like, Magic could lose its pictures and its names, and I cast card 22A. I'm like, Magic would not be Magic. All that stuff. Like, the creative is such a key part of the essence of the experience. And that's why design works so closely with creative. Like, you know, I'm trying to create a card that oozes from every possible orifice that it is what it is. You know, like, I'm really happy also with the zombies in the set, because I feel like Magic has done zombies before, but I never felt like they did zombies like Dawn of the Dead, like zombies, you know, because you're not supposed to be afraid of one zombie. I'm not even a fighter. I could kick the ass of a zombie. Any one zombie, give me a shovel, I can take the zombie. You know what I'm saying? But 2 zombies, 3 zombies, 12 zombies, 100 zombies, like, at some point, that's what makes zombies scary. It's not that you can't handle one, it's that they're never ending, you know? And I was trying to, like, make Magic zombies kind of have that feel of, I want to make a zombie deck where, hey, early on, you shouldn't be that afraid. Oh, look, it's a scathe zombies. Scathe zombies, you know? But how many scathe zombies before you start to be worried, you know? 13, 26, I mean, at some point, there's a lot of scathe zombies, and, you know, and it's a problem. You know, and that's the thing that I love about Innistrad, is that we manage to find, you know, each of those moments. You know, the vampires have their moments, you know, and the humans, here's the great thing. So when we made the human thing, when we did a race class, there's a lot of people worried about humans. And our policy at the beginning was, well, we need to have them, because it didn't make any sense for every other race we mentioned. You know, but we're like, well, we won't ever reference them. Yeah, that's the original, when we started. You know, okay, we'll have it there, because it's weird to have, you know, goblin soldier, but the humans I'm just a soldier. You know, it just felt weird. So, okay, we put humans on. And then finally we got to this set, and we were trying to figure out what we needed. And so early on, we figured out we looked at what I call the Halloween monsters, which is, Dracula, Frankenstein, and Wolfman, right? So it's vampires, zombies, werewolves. And I said, okay, we need to do those. And I'm like, well, what else does horror movies have? And I'm like, you know what they have? Every horror movie has victims. Somebody fighting the monster. That's what makes a horror movie. It's not like it's a horror movie just filled with vampires. And no, there's always a human. Somebody's being stalked by the vampire or the werewolf, whatever, and that person's fighting them. Like, that's what makes horror is humans were a key part of horror. In fact, every horror movie has a human because somebody is the victim, and the humans tend to be the victims. And so we knew we needed humans. And once I realized that, I said, okay, look, if we're going to make humans matter, let's make them matter. Let's actually have human trial. And there was some disagreement with that, but I won people over because I said, look, I wanted to make the pitchfork that who uses the pitchfork? The human uses the pitchfork. And one of the key things in the equipment, by the way, is the way we made equipment work is, you would notice, in a horror movie, there's never weapons. It's never like, I guess there's a shotgun once in a while, but most horror movies is like, I have the kitchen knife, or I have the pitchfork, or I just grab something and I use it as a weapon. And so we made all our equipment are like, they all have a use. They're not weapons per se. Like, it's a butcher knife. And then, a butcher knife will work if you have to, And then we try to make the weapons feel like horror movies because they feel like I just grab it from nearby. And then we wanted to give the humans some feel because, what makes humans different from the monsters? And the idea we like a lot is they work together, and White always does that. And, look, they're the ones who use the weapons. The werewolf doesn't need a weapon. It's got claws. He doesn't need a pitchfork. So the humans, that's the guy who's going to pick up the pitchfork, And I'm very happy with how the humans had a real close identity. I think the humans are protagonists of the whole block. I think it's kind of the human story. And Innistrad Act 1, like I said before, is okay, things look pretty bleak for the humans. Monsters on all sides. One of the problems, Innistrad is doing amazingly well, like crazy good. Obviously everyone's real happy because we like making stuff people love, but you get a little worried. You're like, oh my God, can I follow this up? Can I do something that's gonna match? I think we can. I think Magic's all about doing different things, and next year will just be different. It won't be this, so no horror next year. But it is daunting. This set has gone over so well, that it's, and now given, I've been Magic a long time, so Tempest, people love Tempest, and for a long time, why can't you do Tempest? And then, Mirrodin was very beloved till it broke, or Ravnica obviously is very beloved, and just different sets that I've done that have been very much beloved. So Innistrad's gonna be another sort of it's hilarious to me. This is what I find funny, is I'll make something, Zendikar is a good example where, when I first picked Zendikar, the response initially was, a land set, it's kind of like a horror set. And people were like, I don't know, Mark. And to their credit, they let me try. Okay, let Mark do his crazy land idea. But it's funny that I'll do it, and we'll look back a couple years later, and why can't you make something like that awesome Zendikar? I just feel like it's this weird of, in retrospect, it's funny. It's very funny. The part of the process is trying to look ahead. And it's very hard to come up with the thing that you haven't done yet and then convince people because, you haven't done it yet. How do you convince them? So, but it's my lot in life.
It's these cycles of, they don't believe Mark, they trust him and they work out. They don't believe Mark, they trust him and it works.
Well, here's one of the things that I always assume. At some point at some point, they just go, he seems to be right. Let's just listen to him. But here's what I learned is the role of R&D in some level is to be the skeptic, is to say, really? You think that's a good idea? Why is that a good idea? And I think by trying to prove it is how we get sets where they are. That if I was just left to run wild without any checks and balances, it wouldn't be good for Magic. You guys want the checks and balances. You need people sort of holding me in. Because one of the things I talk about is David Lynch. David Lynch is this crazy director that does wild, nutty stuff. So he is going to go on TV to do Twin Peaks. And so originally, Laura Palmer is the girl who's murdered. The big mystery was who killed Laura Palmer. And the opening shot was naked girl washes up on the shore. And, the TV people said, this is TV. She's not naked. So he went back and he ended up wrapping her in plastic. She watched the shore wrapped in plastic. But you know what? Dead, wrapped in plastic is so much cooler than just naked on the beach. Like, kind of him being constrained and him having to answer things, I thought he found something that's better than what he would have done without the restraints. I mean, I talk about, like creativity needs restraints. The restrictions breed creativity. I strongly believe that. That I feel like if you let a creative person have total blank page, I think it is not good for the process. You kind of want some constraints because constraints is kind of where they excel. To pull this all back in, I feel like the same reason we need to get constraints for game players, why we're throwing obstacles in your way, is that it's kind of getting around the obstacles that is where the genius lies. And I believe that's the same for someone doing creative things, that if it's just open, there's no obstacles, kind of you don't have a chance for the genius.